Hi there guys, got a little video here for you today on the M3, and what we're going to be doing in this one is fitting the Sabre Tactical TRS or top rail support. So this one is the long version, although they do also do a compact version as well. I will measure it out and show you the difference in the sizes, but this one is the long one. And all it does is replace the standard one that's fitted on the M3. But it also does come with a practical upgrade, so this is the front shroud support, and this just fits in the end of the rail system like so and clamps around the shroud, giving it a little extra support. Now the top rail itself really isn't that hard to mount, it's just a case of replacing a couple screws, but I did give this a proper testing over the weekend and I wanted to share with you my findings, and we'll be talking about that when we get to fitting it. So we went for the long rail, as this rifle here is a sub 12 rifle, but it does have the 580 bottle and it does also have a very long shroud in it. The whole rifle is mocked up to be sort of a 700mm sniper edition, although the rifle still has the 500mm barrel and is definitely under sub 12. And the rifle itself pretty much does have all the upgrades now, so we've got the front valve adjuster, we've got the angle mounted gauge there, 720 power plenum, although that is blocked off. We've got the bottom rail with an Accutech fitted. We also do have the quick tune system with the lock installed as well. So there it is there, bag rider as well, and we also have a homemade butt piece. But there it is. So without further ado, we'll get started on fitting the top rail. First thing we're going to do obviously is remove the original one. So we're just going to undo the screws. The back two are 2.5mm Allen keys, and then the front one is a 4mm Allen key. Remove the fixings from the original piece, as we will be using these to fit the new one, and then we can drop the rail over the top. We're just going to do these screws up lightly for now, and we'll do the final alignment very shortly. So we've done all the screws up so that they're touching and then backed them off 1/4 of a turn. Next what we're going to do is align the top rail with the actual barrel itself. The easiest way I've found to do this is take our little shroud support here, push it over our shroud and then push it back into the rail part here, and what that does is just make sure that the rail is nice and aligned with the barrel. If you do the back screws up first, what can happen is the rail can be slightly bent. Then when you put the shroud support in, what you'll do is actually bend the barrel outwards. We definitely don't want that, so do that before we tighten up the screws in the back here. Next we're just going to come back with the 2.5mm Allen key in the back and do these screws up nice and tight. And then the 4mm one in the end there, again nice and tight. Next what we're going to do is just put the securing screws on the front of the barrel clamp here. So these are just these two button heads with the Delrin washers on them. Putting them in both sides and doing them up. So I said before that I did some experimentations over the weekend with the front shroud support there, and I noticed a big difference in the accuracy of the rifle depending on how tight you do these screws up. So I've got some targets here. Now these are all 5-shot groups at 50 yards. The ones at the bottom here are with the screws totally removed, so no screws in and the Delrin piece in the front, and the top ones are with the Delrin piece in and the screws done up as tight as I could with my fingers. So as you can see, some nice little groups at the bottom here that are pretty much all under a 5p piece. We did get one flyer there, but all good groups, and then the ones at the top here with the screws tight were noticeably worse. So you see a lot of scattered pellets, a lot more flyers, and the rifle was obviously not that happy. So obviously the shroud support has a big impact on how the rifle shoots, although we did do a few more experiments and we noticed that if we kept the shroud support on and with the screws done up very lightly, we was able to get some really good groupings. So I would say the rifle actually shot better with the shroud support on it, and you can see the groupings here. We still did get a couple flyers. These could just be pellets. We were using unweighed pellets. But as you can see, some really nice groupings. These are all 5-shot groups at 50 yards. If we look at probably the best one, either one of these two, we see probably an 11mm edge to edge group at the top here, or 6.5mm centre to centre. So the tightness of the screws at the front definitely do play a role in how accurate the rifle is. So all I did to get those results was just very lightly do the screws up so that they just touch the rail itself. That's where I found the best accuracy. I found if you do them up too tight it goes all over the place, and if you leave them loose it doesn't really provide any benefit. Right then, so that's how the rail looks. So as we said before, this is a 580 bottle and this is the long top rail. So if we lay the rifle on its side, I'll get you some measurements and also bring in a standard 480 bottle so you can see how big it is. So probably the most useful measurement is going to be from the front of the block itself to the end of the shroud. So that's roughly 31 centimetres, and that's from the front of the block down here to the edge of the rail, 31 centimetres. The total length of the rail is 46 centimetres and the shorter one is 34 centimetres. So 12 centimetres shorter, 34 would bring it to roughly here. 19 centimetres in front of the block. Right then, so I've got the long shroud as I said before, but what I'll do now is put the compact shroud or the standard 500mm shroud on the rifle and we'll see if it fits. So we're just going to take the front barrel support off first, just so it's a little easier to unscrew the shroud. And what I've got here is a standard length M3 sub 12 shroud. So this one would be the one that comes on both the 177 and the 22 standard length rifles, sub 12 obviously. And as you can see there, it still does fit, although in my opinion it looks a bit funny. So if you imagine a standard rifle would have the 480 bottle on it, so it'd be a little shorter, and that's what it would look like if you had the long rail on a standard sub 12 rifle. In my opinion, if you had a standard rifle you'd be better off getting the shorter or the compact rail rather than the long one, but if you did want the long one it will fit. Next up, what we're going to do is take a look at the level and see how level it is. So I'll get the shroud swapped back over, get it set up nice and level according to this on the bench, and then we'll check it against a known good level. Right then, we've got the rifle set up on the Accutac and I've got it pretty much as level as I can. So the rifle's both level side to side and back to front. As you can see on the bubble there, it looks nice and in the middle to my eye. It might look a little different to the camera, but to my eye it looks identical, or straight in the middle. And if we look at the bubble from the top down there, it is a little biased to one side, but honestly that's nothing to worry about at all. We have got the master level down here, which we'll check as well. And this one is showing a bias to one side as well. Now this level is very sensitive. It's just used for setting up the machines and such, so it looks all the way over to one side, but that's because the level is super sensitive. If we check the top rail as well, we see roughly the same reading, and we can confirm that with that level as well. So the bubble at the back there is a little out, but in my opinion that's really not worth worrying about. Right then guys, let's go about do it for this one. So as you see there, nice overview of the rifle. We've got a scope mounted on it at the moment. That's a Titan. As you can see there, the top rail definitely does transform the look of the rifle. Makes it a lot more interesting in my opinion. The last thing I want to mention on the top rail system itself is in conjunction with the bipod that's mounted, or is going to be mounted on the front here. And that is, if you buy the compact rail, you might not have enough room under your scope to mount it. So as we said before, the standard length rail is 46 centimetres, whereas the compact one is 34. So if you were planning, this is 34cm on the tape, if you were planning on fitting the bipod, you may need to buy the extended one rather than the compact. Me personally, I'm not going to bother with the top mounted bipod. I think, in my opinion at least, it's going to create a little bit of point of impact issue if you're mounting your bipod on the same rail that your scope's mounted to. No matter how stiff this rail is, it still does have a small inherent amount of flex, and when you're sort of banging it around on the bench, putting your bipod down, it may end up moving a bit. So I'm not going to bother with the bipod. Although if you were planning on getting one at some point, you probably will need to get the extended or the long rail. And the very, very last thing I want to mention before you go is that the rail does have 20 MOA built into it. So what this means is that instead of the rail being parallel to the barrel, it's actually at a slight angle. What that does is help the longer range shooters, as it allows the scope to be mounted at a little bit of an angle towards the barrel to help people at longer ranges. Although in sub 12 you may need to counteract this using adjustable mounts. It's nice and easy with the FX ones. I haven't needed to on this rifle, as the Titan, this is a Titan, does have a fairly large elevation adjustment. However, if I did want to get within the centre or the centre adjustment of the scope, I would need to adjust the mounts a little. I didn't bother because it doesn't really bother me that much. But if you have a scope with a very, very small elevation internal adjustment, that's something to bear in mind. Other than that, guys, I'll give you one final closer look at the rifle with the rail fitted, and then we'll call it a day for this video. So that's going to about do it for this one, guys. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.